Hi, I am Pete Heiniger, and this is my wife Shara. And I'm really excited about this week's podcast because we're doing a kind of a continuation. Last time we were able to talk a little bit about Kate Bowler. You read some excerpts from her book, "There's No Cure for Being Human," and kind of just some things. She has similarities and parallels with our journey. She had colorectal cancer. She's fought it. She had it as a chronic condition. That's changed her life and her perspective. And so there's a lot of what she said there that resonated with us. And so we kind of looked at it from, our different perspectives on that. But I'm excited about this episode because we get to hear more from your side this time, because I'm going to ask you some questions from some of the stuff that I took away from Kate's material. But before we get started, I just want to say, Stages podcast is all about changing the conversation around kind of the stigma that's set up with cancer fighters and caregivers and their families and whatnot. There's just a lot of experiences that we've learned through working with cancer fighters and then being cancer fighters and caregivers ourselves that really just happens. Behaviors of friends, different things like that kind of change everything. And so we understand that stigma, and that's why we're talking about it. We're trying to address it head on and kind of be in a different voice and maybe give a different perspective. So I'm super excited. Kate Bowler has meant a lot to me. I'm glad you helped, me become aware of her. And so one of the things that I saw that she repeats kind of throughout, not just the book, but she also, you hear it in her podcast and interviews and different things like that, is she in the one sense, she turned to her dad and had a similar statement like this, but then she repeats it again. Is she says, "I don't know how to do this." She had to come to grips with the fact, I don't know how to do this, live life as a chronic condition. It's daunting, right? I mean, there's something that is a journey that's this long-term thing. And so I thought one of the first things we should do is kind of define, what makes something a chronic condition, instead of maybe, let's say, like, let's compare it to, let's say, a triple bypass or something like that. So, those are some things I thought we'd bring out. So in your take, as you look at things, what really defines a chronic condition versus just some other condition?
Something that doesn't have any end in sight, whether it's diabetes, chronic migraines, chronic back pain, anything that doesn't have any end in sight.
Yeah. Like, there are some things that you can go through, and you go through a surgery or you go through a procedure, and yes, they might require some lifestyle changes in diet and different things like that. But, it's kind of, you go through it, you recover, and then you're on the mend, right? And I think, if you get, an ACL injury and stuff, I mean, there are certain things where that you might be more susceptible to injury, but there's something to be said about, like, something that looks like it's long for the foreseeable future. It's just going to be a thing. And especially, I think, when we use the word chronic, that it can be life-threatening. And so it's not like, something minor is going to happen, or it might make your life a little bit miserable or painful. This gives me uncertainty, and uncertainty is whether I'll live, and how long I'll live. So now that we've kind of defined chronic condition, I think what I wanted to do is, like, let's say that whole phrase over again, and then let's talk about it now. So she said, "I don't know how to do this, live life as a chronic condition." Like, how do I do that? How do I wrap my head around it? Because there's this, like you said, there's this uncertainty and there's a longevity, right? It just is ongoing. There's no end in sight. So let's talk about that complete thing. So you had mentioned some things about, just as we were talking about this, about my mom. So, like, unpack it from that standpoint. I mean, before, when we faced cancer, the only experience that we had really had up close and personal was my mom, right, who died of metastatic melanoma of the liver. So
Right.
kind of describe that process.
So we think she probably had cancer that had spread internally from a skin cancer through her spine and then throughout the rest of her body. We think that probably, our speculation is that it started about a year ago, year before she died. But when we found out, we had about 2 weeks before she died. So, and then during her, those 2 weeks, we also experienced the word palliative, which in her scenario was different than yours, but palliative, when we heard it with your mother was, we're just helping her die well. So when we heard palliative with your diagnosis, that day, we had a totally skewed view of what the word meant. And that can really get your brain going on.
Yeah, so I mean, so my mom, we were living in California at the time, and we were in Ripon, California, and I get a phone call. We were in Home Depot. It's my dad. He says, mom's not looking too good. They don't know what it is. And it looks, she looks like she's something like 8 months pregnant or something like that. So her abdomen is swollen and everything. And so, but they had not given a diagnosis. They didn't say the C word. So I called my brother in Germany. I said, hey, I want to update you on this. Let's make plans that kind of coincide with one another so we could both fly into Pittsburgh around the same time and then grab a rental car, and then go straight up to Erie, Pennsylvania, where my mom was. And over the course of that, they finally gave a cancer diagnosis and whatnot. But that's where they started saying, well, it's terminal. And I remember asking the oncologist, like, if this is your mom, are you staying here? Is this gonna last a long time? And he says, this is my mom. I'm making as many preparations right now as possible. She's not gonna live beyond the week. And so we're moving her today to hospice. So it's the first time you hear the word hospice, is the first time you hear the word palliative. And so what you're saying is, when they gave me the stage 4 diagnosis, is she was describing that, well, we're gonna come up with a palliative care process and strategy. And for us hearing that, we're like, oh, so we're just chucking it in, like, this must be terminal. This is like, almost a guaranteed death. We'll just see how much time we can buy you. And so I think, that was the only lens that we had at the time. And so that kind of puts you on edge, like, oh, we could be talking days, weeks, maybe a month, and stuff. And so we had to kind of adjust that as we started asking questions and doing things. But that was certainly something that we probably didn't hear another word after the word palliative, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so, but I would say that even though we learned that it was, it brought great, there's more longevity, this is a long journey, it still carries with it the same amount of uncertainty as there was with my mom, right? I mean, there's still that thing of just looking at,
this is how we keep you alive. Like,
yes,
is bit the other definition that we didn't know
yes,
about at the time.
yeah, this is just, we're gonna fight to keep you alive and keep cancer at bay. I think what I want to do here too is just talk about, like, in real terms, so not just in the past, but like as of this week, so that gets pretty fresh, right? Is so if you don't know, this past, about 6 weeks, we both got COVID. We got the what is the strand?
Delta
We had the
variant.
Delta variant. And so we had that, and that opened up an opportunity for us to pull the trigger on radiation, because one of the big considerations around radiation treatment is you have to go off of chemo. And so, and chemo is the only thing, keeping everything at bay. And so to go off of it is risky. And so you're always justifying, like, oh, probably don't want to pull the trigger yet. But when you get COVID, they wouldn't let me take chemo. Like they're like, no, you tested positive. And it wasn't just because we don't want you in, exposing others. It was also, we need you in full recovery. You can't fight both chemo and COVID at the same time. That's going to be a recipe for disaster.
Mhm.
So that opened the window of, if I've already stopped chemo and then I fully recover from COVID, then before we restart, maybe this opens up a window of opportunity to do radiation. And so
And
that's,
then you were having symptoms. You were,
yeah, I mean, there are other things that contributed to that decision, but so we went forward. So then that was a week of prep and getting ready and kind of going through run-throughs and stuff like that. And then I started on a Monday, and then you had Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of radiation. Long story short, then you get 2 weeks that you have to recover from that before you can go back to chemo. So this week was my first week on chemo, back in kind of the thing. And now the schedule kind of during a chemo week is Monday you pull blood labs and they test you for all these different things, and then you get that test results. And one of those test results is this carcinogenic embryonic number, which is your cancer kind of number, your cancer count number. And different cancers have different cancer numbers, but that's the one we look at. And so we started at when I first was diagnosed, my number was
28.
Then we've been doing this for a year. So we had it all the way down to 5. And which, if you've ever smoked before or anything like that consistently, 5 is actually a normal range for anyone who's smoked. And so you feel like, okay, well, wow, I've fought really hard, but I can see the results.
Yep.
Like it's working, right? And then our scans were supporting that and seeing that. However, before all of this COVID stuff and everything, we started to see that number go up, and it'd go up by 2, then it went up by 3, then it was going up, and it was on a consistent state. So we get our lab results on this Monday, and it's 17.5. And then when I have then the next day I have my consult with my oncologist, because my cancer team has to sign off on every chemo that I do. So we always do that 24 hours before chemotherapy. So as I'm talking with my doctor, we call it Dr. S, she's sharing she doesn't know that I've seen the number. And so she goes, do you have any questions for me?
And she hadn't seen the number.
She had not looked at it yet. And so I'm like, well, yeah, I have one thing that you haven't covered, which is, the cancer number. And she goes, oh, good, let's look at that, because that should have gone down because of radiation.
And that's what your radiologist doctor said too.
And
The
so
radiation would help
that number go down. And then I go, well, it actually went up by 5 points. And then, I could kind of read her eyes that she's like, and she tried to mitigate that with, sometimes inflammation, other things can cause that number. But it doesn't take away from the fact that here we are in this chronic thing. And I just went through COVID. I just endured and fought through radiation, all with which everything I've done so far, fight, has ended up with results. And then as lately, I'm hitting a brick wall. And so then it's like, well, does that mean there's cancer growing somewhere else? Did it spread? Did it go somewhere? Is it expanding in my liver now? Because I have lesions in my liver that were going down, but now are those, so there's all these questions and uncertainty. And of course, you're not going to know until you can schedule scans. And of course, scans can't be just randomly scheduled for the next week. And so you have a waiting period before you can do scans. And and scans are like, when they do all these abdominal scans and everything, you put contrast in and can kind of look at all the known areas for tumor and then see how we're doing. So we have those scans scheduled, but that's concerning, right? And so you're dealing with all that mentality. So that's another way where you have to kind of live with this chronic condition. And you're living in this constant state of uncertainty. And I think there's a lot of questions that come up there, right, that you have to deal with and things that you have to come to grips with. So I wanted to talk about this other statement and this and that Kate makes, and she uses it as an illustration again in several different places. But so she gives this example. She talks about one of the best pieces of advice she was ever given were by these hikers who have hiked the Appalachian Trail. And for those of you who don't know about the Appalachian Trail, it's this long hike. It goes through, way up the state, I think all the way to Maine, from kind of down by North Carolina or Tennessee or something like that. But it's about 2,200 miles roughly. And so this is a long journey. It's a hard journey. And if you've never done it before, then you have a tendency to overpack and over prepare. And so you've got all this gear because you don't know, like, is it going to rain? Is it going to snow? I've never done this before. What do I need? Do I have enough supplies? Do I have enough food? All these things. And so they tend to overpack. And so I think one of the takeaways from that really parallels to chronic conditions is that in the face of adversity, we tend to carry really heavy burdens. We really kind of carry around these things because we don't know how long is the journey. How long do I have? What is this going to mean? Is there all these things that we've just mentioned make that hard? So in the face of adversity, we tend to carry those really heavy burdens. And so the piece of advice that she got is that all of these people start the Appalachian Trail, and then there's stops along the way. And at those stops are these guides who they've hiked the Appalachian Trail. They're seasoned veterans. And so one of the first things that they ask those hikers at that first stop is there any part of your burden that you think you can put down? And what they'll do is they'll pack it up. You give them an address, they ship it to your loved one, or whatever, and they kind of lighten your load, right? So they're trying to encourage you. Can we give you some advice? Can we tell you what we think you're going to need? And then you might not need some of this stuff till step to also have your loved one bring it to that step instead of you carrying it, right? So is there anything that you can put down? So Kate talks about this, and I just want to get this quote right, but it says, I think when you ask that question, is there anything set down, she internalized that and said, can we set down our expectations to be overly positive and cheerful? There's this kind of mentality that everybody wants to see a fighter, everyone wants to see somebody tough, everyone wants to see game face. People are you get this sense of like, I have to be inspiring, I have to be the person who puts a positive spin on everything, all things will work together. It's just that this thing, and she's just like, no, that's so toxic. That's just toxic positivity to put yourself on that. It's denying you being human, right? And so she had to say, can we put down that expectation of being overly positive and cheerful? And can we also maybe set down one of the burdens we can release ourselves from is, can we set down some of our fears? And can we set down our inability to ask for help? Are those some things that we can set down? And so what I wanted to do is get more of your perspective from a caregiver, Shara, is that, obviously I can kind of unpack that, what it means to me. But I think what is really helpful is kind of look at it, because you're not saying I have to live with uncertainty that I'll die. I have to live with uncertainty that my husband could die. So let's talk about that. If you think about kind of, you begin like the whole beginning of like your marriage and all these things you look forward to, like, why don't we start there and just kind of, what is that like for you? What have you had to come to terms with?
Just that my life before hearing the words stage 4 cancer and after that were going to be two different lives. And I've said it before, but one of the things I said early on to God was, I'm, I'm sorry for being disillusioned enough to think that I have control about anything in my life. So it was giving up that need to control everything, and realizing that there would be more unknowns than knowns would at some time, but also choosing to be that different person, but take care of myself during it.
Because we kind of start out, relationships, and you have all these kind of dreams and aspirations probably before you ever get married. Like what's leading to the engagement and everything is this, you make this decision that I want to grow old with this person, that there are all these seasons that you look forward to. Oh, I can't wait till we have children. Then it's like, I can't wait till, it all goes to like rocking on the front porch and growing old together, having grandkids, going through weddings and all that stuff. And so as you start to think through, and it's different for everyone, and kind of what that relationship meant to you. But as you start to think through those things, usually there's long journey of life together, committed together for a long time. And then all these seasons that you're looking forward to. Oh, we can go travel, we can go do this, we can do that, and it's all going to be together, and it's going to be fun. And then you walk into something like this in this chronic state, and then you mentioned to me earlier when we were talking about it, just a year ago you were like, is this my last Christmas with Pete? Is that going to be his last Christmas? Is this going to be his last birthday? Is this, as you start coming to these milestones in life, and you're not thinking of the porch and growing old together or grandkids, you're thinking, do I have another month, 5 months, how fast? Because again, we know the reality is, cancer can all of a sudden, and it just moves fast, and you don't have any control over that, right? And so, that I know that weighed on you. So when you think of it like fresh, like this week, we just experienced like what we just said, you get this, cancer number goes to 17, 0.5 or whatever. And it's, we, have the surprise, our doctor has a surprise look in her face. Not exactly what she wanted to see. Like unpack that fresh this week. Like, do those things rise back up?
And there are the whole level of not being able to control anything. If you hear that statement, you can't control what happens to you, but you can control your reaction to it and how you handle it. And that is something I'm working on, to like give myself space to just, when I have a day off, I go with you to chemo, but then in the afternoon, I'm like, I'm going to take it easy. I'm going to do like a day off here instead of putting in a gazillion chores and making it another work day, just work at home day, So some of that is just reprioritizing what I want to spend energy on, and what I can't spend energy on too.
So in light of what kind of Kate talks about too, we have to fight and be careful. I think we've got to be open. Part of the goal of this podcast and part of the goal of stages, and even, we have a group on Facebook called Pete's Posse. And if you ever want to be a part of that, just send us a message. You can get us on the Stages website, or if you look us up on Facebook, Pete Heiniger, Shara Heiniger, you'll find us. But DM, and we'll put you in that group, and then you can follow the journey that we're on there too. But I think one of the temptations is that you want to spin it positive, right? And there's a moment where part of this journey is people have signed on because they don't have that expectation that this we sometimes put on ourselves, right? Like, I have to be able to say and look at you right now and say, um, I'm scared. Like, and I've had to come to grips with it's okay to say that, and it's okay to have that. Like, that's human. I'm scared of what that growing cancer number means. I'm scared of all the things we just mentioned. It weighs heavy on me. But I think one of the things that came to light this week is just, I often struggle with, I remember early on I was talking to a buddy of mine named Josh, and his wife had fought cancer, was still kind of in a fight, and he was giving me their journey and their experience through it, and he said, one of the hard challenges is that if you're not careful, you can let the disease envelop all of your relationships, and it feels like this, almost like a planet with its own gravitational pull, and it's pulling cancer into the center of your friendships, of your relationship with your wife, your kids. And that just scared me, because I could see how that could be a reality. And I think this week it hit me, because I keep getting these beautiful friends who are texting me, and I want them to text me. So if you're listening to this, you're one of those friends, I want you to continue to do it. It's not the message. It's when they say, I'm checking in on you, I care about you, and things like that. You fight this thing of am I a burden? Like, is this, have I reduced our friendship to the I'm the friend with cancer, I'm the friend that and is that controlling all dimensions? I think that's the thing that I have to keep reminding myself, is that response is human. It's okay for me to feel that way. That's not how my friends want me to feel. That's not what you want me to feel. But it's hard to fight that, right? We're talking to a friend that we hadn't connected with for a while, and she mentioned she was having some health problems and had gotten remarried since we knew her, and she mentioned how she felt so unfair, right? Her husband's having to take care of her so much, and that's just a natural human reaction to when you go from being a person who probably wanted to be Johnny on the spot for everyone else and taking care of people. And when I was in ministry and different things like that, I just always wanted to take care of people. I wanted to be there for people. I wanted to be a resource and for whatever dimension or need that they had. And then when you are the recipient on that, it's a really hard adjustment to accept, that you're needy and that you are struggling with your mental health, that you're fighting these deep, terrible, chronic feelings, and you're scared to tell anybody about it because it's this magnet that's drawing everybody in, right? And yet there are people, maybe not everyone, maybe not all your friends, but there are people who have identified themselves as, I sign up for that. I'm okay with you having that conversation. I might not have great grand words of wisdom. I can't snap a finger and make it change, but I want you to tell me how you are, and I'm okay, and I'm walking that with you. But that's hard. I have to tell you, it's hard. And so the last thing we wanted to close with is we were both, as we've gone through stages, and we kind of started stages right out of the gate. So it's almost been a year that we've been doing the stages thing. And we have had, hundreds of opportunities, with people who get on the site, cancer fighters, caregivers, recommendations from friends, all these people that we've connected with who are cancer fighters. And I would have to say that our experience over the most part has been, and this is what we want to advise you against, if you're a cancer fighter or a caregiver, is it's always been this reluctance to open up, like, hey, we're here, and they'll identify, I'm a cancer fighter, I'm scared, I have breast cancer, I'm scared, and I've got stage 4 cancer. So they'll go that far, but then as you start to reach out and say, hey, can we call, can we talk, can we Can we do a Zoom call? Can, depending on where they live, can we grab coffee? Can we do something so we can love on you and have fun with you, and just see where you are, and help you through this, because you're not alone. That's our big message. You don't have to go through this alone. Like, we're here, and we're getting ready in the near future to make a huge announcement, something we've been working on for a while, which is going to be something Stages is going to be able to provide for all cancer fighters and caregivers, and we'll be making the announcement shortly. But I don't want to spoil it, but it goes to that same thing of always being able to show up. But one of the things we found is that they just kind of fall off the planet. Like, they just stop talking. I identified this. I'm listening to your podcast. I'm listening to your videos and your blogs, and they're great. Thank you. But then when it goes to having a relationship and
Letting a
talking,
stranger in.
letting a stranger in, they go it alone, right? And some of the things that you discover is that it's not just us that they're not letting in. They're not letting anyone in, and they're trying to go it alone. And so that's the biggest message that we want to, give to you, is if you're watching this, don't, God didn't design us. We're not designed to go it alone. Like, it's like, that's why the church is in existence. That's community and people and support, and you need that. Like, and it's not going to be good for your family, for your loved ones, for anyone, if you just pull in and isolate yourself. So what would you say about that? Because I know that's something that you have fought not to do. And so, like, how did you achieve that? What did you do?
Just deciding that I needed people in my life, and I needed to prioritize that.
And you've got different people that you meet with on a consistent basis, almost weekly. And you spend time. Some people you walk during the day and during your break at work. Some people whenever you have that Wednesday off or something, or a Saturday, you're going and meeting up with them and having weekly time. You've got other people that you connect with. We've really, have some beautiful friends that we get together with consistently, and they're just there. And so much of it, can revolve around cancer. I mean, it can be there if it needs to be, but it's also beautiful that we just sit and hang out and chill out and talk about nothing. Or, like, what did we talk about the other night was like all the different, we were kind of in a movie hole or movie rut, and we were all like, what are you watching? What are you watching? Because we need a new show. And so, it's stuff like that just kind of takes your mind off of everything. So we just want to say that we love you and we care about you. And if the biggest takeaway that we could do is just tell you, ask that question when you have a chronic condition like cancer, and you're going through it. You ask that question: what can I set down? What can I give a burden off to someone? And it starts with inviting people in. It starts with, can you let yourself be human? You don't have to be the positive person or paint everything in a great light and not be depressing.
Lower your expectations on, like you were talking about how you don't feel like you contribute enough around the house, but you lowering your expectations and not putting that so much on yourself.
So each person's going to be a little bit different, but you have to be real honest with yourself. And that's why it's a great partnership between a caregiver and a cancer fighter, is that we can have that conversation together, and we can say, okay, what is it that I need to lay down specifically? And I think that is going to help you with that idea of, how do I live with chronic cancer, right? And this condition. So we love you, and we hope this was super beneficial to you. And again, we're scared, we're uncertain, we have depressing moments, we've got real struggles, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and we're not going to candy coat those. Those are things that we have. And that's why we have to keep, this is a constant battle to keep putting those things down, because sometimes those are the results of on it, bad expectations, putting too much on ourselves, and all
Yep.
these things we've talked about. So just keep asking yourself that question, because we have to ask it almost daily, sometimes at least weekly. What can we put down? What can I give off to a friend, group of friends? What can we do? So we love you, and we pray that you keep expanding that community around you, because you need it. All right. You guys take care, and we'll talk to you soon.